Chapter 3 of The Girl Who Circumnavigated Fairyland in a Ship of Her Own Making. Here's the introduction picture there for you. Chapter 3. Hello, Goodbye, and Many Thanks, in which September nearly drowns, meets 3 witches, one a werewolf, and is entrusted with the quest for a certain spoon. Salt water hit September like a wall. It roared foamily in her eyes, snatched at her hair, dragged at her feet with cold, purple-green hands. She gasped for air and got 2 lungfuls of freezing, thick sea. Now September could swim quite well. She had even won 2nd medal at a tournament in Lincoln. She had a trophy with a winged lady on it, although she had always wondered what use a flying girl would have for swimming. The lady should have had webbed feet, September was sure. But in all her after-school practices, her coaches had never impressed upon her the importance of practicing her butterfly stroke while being dropped from a great height without any ceremony at all into an ocean. With fairy ooze in one's eyes, really, September thought, how could they leave something like that out? She floundered and dipped beneath the giant waves, only to bob up again, spluttering, gulping air. She kicked hard, struggling to get her legs properly under her and orient herself towards the shore, if there was a shore, so that the waves could carry her towards land, if land there was, and not away from it. Riding the crest of a horrid wave, sickeningly upwards, she turned her head as fast as she could and glimpsed through the last stubborn streaks of ointment a fuzzy, orangish strand off to the west. Against the will of the water she hauled her body around until she was more or less pointed at it, and stroked as fast as she could on the swell of the next wave, letting it push her and punch her and drag her, whatever it liked, as long as it was closer and closer to land. September's arms and legs burned, and her lungs were seriously considering giving up the whole thing. But on she went, and on, until quite unexpectedly her knees knocked against sand, and she fell face first as the last wave slid up past her onto a rose-colored shore. September coughed and shook. On her hands and knees she threw up a fair bit of the perverse and perilous sea onto the beach. She squeezed her eyes shut and shivered until her heart stopped beating quite so fast. When she opened her eyes, she was steadier, but elbow-deep in the beach and sinking fast. Thick red rose petals, twigs, thorny leaves, yellowish chestnut husks, pine cones, and rusty tin bells littered the shoreline as far as she could see. September scrambled and tripped and waded through the strange, sweet-smelling rubbish, trying to find some solid ground beneath the blackberry brambles and robin's eggshells and wizened, dried toadstools. The land was not very much more solid than the sea, but at least she could breathe, in sharp, jerky gulps, as the brambles pricked at her and the twigs pulled at her hair. I have not been in Fairyland nearly long enough to start crying, September thought, then bit her tongue savagely. That was better, she could think, and the flotsam of the beach did seem to get shallower as she pushed through the wreckage. Finally, the wreckage was only knee-deep, and she could trudge through it like so much heavy snow. At the far edge of the shore were tall, silvery cliffs, spotted with brave, stubborn little trees that found purchase on the rocks and grew straight out sideways from the cliffside. At their tops, great birds wheeled and cried, their long necks glowing bright blue in the afternoon light. She stood alone on the beach, breathing heavily. She rubbed her eyes to get the last of the gnome ointment out, where it had hardened like sleep dust. When September's eyes were clean of salt and gnome, she looked back down to the beach in the direction she had come from. Suddenly, the beach didn't look like rose petals and sticks and eggshells at all. It glittered gold, real gold, all the way down to the violet-green water. Doubloons and necklaces and crowns, pieces of 8 and plates and bricks and long glittering scepters. These shone so brightly September had to shade her eyes. No matter how she walked, To the left or right, the shore stayed firmly golden now. September shivered. She was terribly hungry and dripping rather dramatically. She wrung out her hair and the skirt of her orange dress onto a huge golden crown with crosses on it. The jacket, mortified that it had been so distracted from its duties by a mere momentary drowning, hurriedly puffed out, billowed in the sea wind until it was quite dry. Well, September thought, it's all certainly very strange, but the green wind is not here to explain it any more, and I can't stay on the beach all day like a sunbather. A girl in want of a leopard still has feet. She looked out at the rolling purple-green waves of the sea once more. A stirring that she could not name flooded within her, something deep and strange, to do with the sea and the sky. But deeper than the stirring was her hunger and her need to find something that bore fruit or sold meat or baked bread. She folded up the stirring very carefully and put it away at the bottom of her mind. Tearing her eyes from the stormy waves, she began to walk. After a moment, she prudently knelt down and gathered up a particularly jewel-encrusted scepter. You never know, she thought. I might have to ransom things, or bribe folk, or even buy something. September was not prone to stealing, but neither was she entirely stupid. She began to walk up the beach, using the scepter as a walking stick. The going was not easy. Gold is very slippery to walk on and insists on sliding all over the place. She found that her bare foot was actually a bit more suited to the task than the shod one, as she could grasp at the gleaming gold ground with her toes. Nevertheless, every step set off a little cascade of coins. By afternoon, September thought she had probably stepped on the collective national worth of Finland. Just as this grown-up thought crossed her mind, a long, peculiar shadow fell across her path. In Omaha, signposts are bright green with white writing, or occasionally white with black writing. September understood those signs and all the things they pointed to. But the signpost before her now was made of pale, wind-bleached wood that towered above her, a beautiful carved woman with flowers in her hair, a long goat's tail winding around her legs, a solemn expression on her sea-worn face. The deep gold light of the Fairyland sun played on her carefully whittled hair. She had wide, flaring wings like September's swimming trophy. The wooden woman had 4 arms, each outstretched in a different direction, pointing with authority. On the inside of her easterly arm, pointing backwards in the direction September had come, someone had carved in deep, elegant letters, "To lose your way." On the northerly arm, pointing up to the tops of the cliffs, it said, "To lose your life." On the southerly arm, pointing out to the sea, it said, "To lose your mind." And on the westerly arm, pointing up to a little headland and a dwindling of the golden beach, it said, "To lose your heart." September bit her lip. She certainly didn't want to lose her life, so the cliffs were right out, even if she thought she could climb them. Losing her mind was not too much better, and besides, there was nothing about with which to fashion a sea-going vessel, unless she wanted to sink promptly on a raft of gold. She had already lost her way, walking for miles in this direction, and anyway, if one's way cannot get anywhere, she definitely wanted to get somewhere, even if she didn't know where somewhere was. Somewhere mainly involved food and a bed and a fireplace, whereas here had only fairy gold and a roaring cold sea. Only the heart was left. You and I, being grown up and having lost our hearts at least twice or thrice along the way, might shut our eyes and cry out, "Not that way, child." But as we have said, September was somewhat heartless and felt reasonably safe on that road. Children always do. Besides, she could see the smoke off into the distance, wafting upwards in thin curlicues. September ran off towards the spiraling smoke. Behind her, the beautiful 4-armed woman who pointed the way closed her eyes and shook her birchwood head ruefully and knowing. "Hello!" called September as she ran, tripping over the last of the gold bricks and scepters. "Hello!" 3 figures hunched blackly around a large pot, a cauldron, really, huge and iron and rough. They were dressed very finely, 2 women in old-fashioned high-collared dresses with bustles, hair drawn back in thick chignons, and a young man in a lovely black suit with tails. But what September chiefly noticed were their hats. Any child knows what a witch looks like. The warts are important, yes, the crooked nose, the cruel smile, but it's the hat that cinches it. Pointy and black with a wide rim, plenty of people have warts and hooked noses and cruel smiles, but are not witches at all. Hats change everything. September knew this with all of her being, deep in the place where she knew her own name, that her mother would still love her even though she hadn't waved goodbye. For one day her father had put a hat with golden things on it, and suddenly he hadn't been her father anymore. He had been a soldier, and he had left. Hats have power. Hats can change you into something else. These hats were not Halloween witch hats, made of thin satin or construction paper and spangled with cheap glitter. They were leather, heavy and old, creased all over, their points slumped to one side, being too majestic and massive to be expected to stand up straight. Old knotted silver buckles gleamed malevolently on their sides. Their brims jutted out, sagging a little, the kind of brims you might expect cowboys to have, the kind that isn't for show, but to keep out wind and rain and sun. The witches hunched a little under the weight of their hats. "Hello," September said, and a little more politely, but only a little. "What?" snapped one of the women, looking up from her muttering. She held a beaten black book in one hand, heavily dog-eared. "I said hello." "Yes, that's me." "What?" said September, confused. "Are you very dull or very deaf?" said the other woman, flinging an alarmed lizard into the cauldron. "Oh," cried the young man, "a little deaf child, how sweet! We should adopt her and teach her to write symphonies. She'll be all the rage in town. I'll buy her powdered wig and a tricorn." "I'm not deaf," said September, who was very cross when she was angry. "Or dull. I said hello, and you said nothing sensible at all." "Manners, child," said the woman with the book, her cruel witch's smile curling up at the corners of her lips. "If you haven't got your manners, you might as well toss it all and become a witch." She peered at the cauldron, and after a moment's disapproving stare, spat into it. "My name is Hello," she continued as if nothing had happened. "So you see the confusion. This is my sister Goodbye, and our husband Many Thanks." "He's married to both of you. How odd!" Suddenly their eyes narrowed, and they stood very straight. September hurried to correct herself. My name is September. How do you do?" "We do perfectly well," said Goodbye coldly, pinching off one of the black pearl buttons at her throat and tossing it into the brew. "It all works out very nicely, really. My sister and I are very close and very efficient, and when we were young it seemed like a great waste of time for both of us to go through the tiresome nonsense of courtship and blushing behind curtains and love potions and marriage, so we went through it once, together. We estimate that we saved each other 2 full years of living. And besides, all witches must keep up a certain level of deviance in their personal lives, or we shall be expelled from the union." Hello smiled as demurely as a witch can manage. "We chose Many Thanks for his many virtues, because besides being a wonderful cook and a superb mathematician, he is also a werewolf." "Really? A werewolf? And you turn into a wolf when the moon is full?" Many Thanks grinned. "No, dear, a werewolf." She rolled her R's a little. Otherwise it seemed quite the same word to September. "It's quite different. 27 days a month, my love is a fine wolf, with the great powerful jaw and thumping tail. During the full moon he becomes human, as he is now. My husband is the wolf, hers is the man." "That doesn't seem quite fair," said September. "She gets a lot more husband." "Oh, we agreed upon it long ago. I don't like men to talk too much, and she doesn't like them too much underfoot," Hello said with a laugh. Goodbye smiled at her husband with a deep fondness. "Aren't you afraid of the wolf?" asked September, who secretly felt she might get over such a fear if the wolf would love her and guard her and not get mud on the covers. I'm quite civilized, I promise. Many thanks, sniffed, smiling. Werewolves are cultured. We have choirs and charity races and Rotary clubs. It's when we're human that you must take care. Now what is it you want, child? As you can see, we're quite busy. Goodbye sniffed deeply at the pot. Be bold, thought September. An ill-tempered child should be bold. I hoped you might have something for me to eat. I've only just gotten here and I'm, well, not lost because I haven't any idea where to go, that I might get lost on the way too. Even to September that did not sound quite right. I'd like to get lost because then I'd know where I was going, you see, but the green wind wasn't terribly clear about what to do once I got here, only what not to do, so getting lost would be making very good headway, all things considered. But I don't know where I am, and the beach was full of garbage, and then it wasn't. Fairy gold, interrupted Many Thanks. It lies about waiting for a fairy to pick it up on her way to the human world. You must have had some gnome ointment gobbled on you, or you wouldn't have been able to see it at all. Some things any old ravished child can see, some things are meant only for locals. Yes, Betsy, she showed me Rupert, but then she threw some stuff at me too. September clutched her scepter a little tighter. She must have taken a shine to you. I assume Rupert was very terrible and frightening. A good scare will knock your eyeballs sideways enough to see a few brownies, but not enough for fairy gold and other things besides. Else, playing tricks on tourists would not be half as fun. The werewolf sighed heavily. He had little wrinkles at the corner of his eyes. But there's rationing these days, and gnome stuff is precious. Have you any left? Many Thanks peered at her eyes and sighed disappointment. September did not like being examined so closely. I'm very hungry, Sir Wolf, she whispered hopefully. Is that soup? Don't you dare, breathed Goodbye. It's our spell, and you can't have any. September brightened a little. This was what she had come for. Witches and spells and werewolves. What sort of spell? All three looked at her, as though she had asked what color a carrot is. We're witches, said Hello. Many Thanks pointed meaningfully at his hat. But witches do all kinds of spells. That's sorceresses, corrected Goodbye. And magic? That's wizards, sighed Hello. And they change people into things? That's Thatchermagurians, puffed Many Thanks. And they make people do things? Enchantresses, sneered Goodbye. And they do curses and hexes? Stragus, hissed both sisters. And change into owls and cats? Bruchas, growled Many Thanks. Well, what do witches do then? September refused to feel foolish. It was hard enough for a human to get into Fairyland. True stories must be nearly impossible to get out. We look into the future, grinned Goodbye, and we help it along. Why do you need lizards and buttons for that? And such nice clothes. Look who's a witch now, mocked Hello, snapping her book shut. Well, could you know about it? The future is messy, motley business, little girl. We have to dress well, whispered Goodbye, or the future would not take us seriously. Many Thanks put his hands out to his wives. She's just a child. We were once children. She knows nothing of the future. Be kind. We can afford to be kind to this one when there is so much ahead of her. Many Thanks reached into his pocket and took out a fat candle wrapped in wax. He unwrapped it corner by corner, slowly, as if revealing the vanished dove at the end of a magic trick. Inside was a thick slice of deeply red cake, so moist it wet the paper, slathered with rich red icing. It glowed in the gloom of the seaside. The werewolf bent down to her, the black tails of his suit whipping in the wind, and offered it, balanced delicately on one flat hand. September tried not to snatch it too fast. She swallowed it in 3 wolfish bites, so starving she was. But hadn't the green wind said something about eating fairy food? Well, reasoned September, this isn't the same thing at all, it's witch food. I don't suppose, gulped September when the cake had settled in her belly, that you would tell me what was ahead of me, so I could look out for it. Hello, I believe we have an utterly unique specimen on our hands, a child who listens. Goodbye said, laughing. Goodbye laughed a lot. Many Thanks shook his head. There's really more a seer's business, love. I'd be happy to show you your future, little one, interrupted Hello, but her voice was dark. The witch dipped her bare hand into the gurgling, boiling soup of the cauldron. She hauled out a handful of lumpy muck, the color of bruises and jam gone off. She flung it at the earth, where it steamed and wriggled and reeked. All three witches peered at the glob intently. Many Thanks poked at it with a neatly trimmed fingernail. It quivered. The sisters looked meaningfully at one another. September tried to peer as well, but did not feel she had the hang of it. My future looks lumpy, she said uncertainly. Goodbye broke ranks with her family and swooped around the great cauldron, kneeling before September. The witch suddenly looked very beautiful, her pale hair swept back, her dark eyes bright. September did not remember her looking so beautiful before when she was stirring the pot, but now Goodbye's face fairly glowed, her lips perfectly rose-colored, her cheeks high, aristocratic, even blushing a little. September, she breathed. Her voice was pure honey wine, warm and deep and sweet. That's what you said your name was, yes? I prefer October myself, but it's such a pretty name. Your parents must have loved you very much to give you a name like that. Do you like my name? It's unusual, like yours. Yes. September felt odd. She wanted to please Goodbye very much, but more she wanted Goodbye to like her, to love her even, and to tell her more about how much they were alike. The witch laughed again. But now it was a long, rippling laugh, full of notes, almost like a song. My sister has no shame at all, September, Goodbye continued. That's a very secret thing she did, right in front of you. You see, the future is a kind of stew, a soup, a vichyssoise of the present and the past. That's how you get the future. You mix up everything you did today with everything you did yesterday and all the days before, and everything anyone you ever met did, and anyone they ever met too. And salt and lizard and pearl and umbrellas and typewriters and a lot of other things I'm not at liberty to tell you because I took vows, and a witch's vows have teeth. Magic is funny like that. It's not a linear thinker. The point is, if you mash it up all good together, and you have a big enough pot, and you're very good at witchcraft, you can wind up with a prophecy, a cauldron full of tomorrow. That lump of greasy, slimy goop is a prophecy, and my sister cast it for you. What does it say? Goodbye smiled like the rising sun. Oh, so many things. September, if you only knew how to look. Would you like to know? Would you like to be able to divine the meaning of that blob there, the color of mashed potato, the vein of jelly? Would you like to be a witch? Witchery is a life of wonder, said Hello. All the wheeling stars at your command, all the days of the future laid out before you like dolls in bronze armor. And a really top-notch hat, added Many Thanks. The Marquis has a fine hat, too, said September, shaking her head to clear Goodbye's sudden perfume. I've been told. Their faces darkened a little. Well, I'm sure we'll all be wearing tweed trousers by fall, Goodbye snapped sarcastically. She shut her eyes and shook her head. When she opened them, they were once more pools of deep violet, glistening with promises. But we were discussing your prospects, my dear. For as much as I would like to bring you into my coven this very day, something bars me from accepting such a charming, polite, intelligent young ward. For a witch is nothing without her spoon, and the Marquis stole mine years ago, because she is a capricious and selfish and a brat. Hello and Many Thanks drew back from Goodbye as though the Marquis might appear at that very moment and punish the brazen witch soundly. Goodbye hurried on. But if some intrepid, brave, darling child went to the city and got it for me, well, a witch could be grateful. You'll know the way right away. It's a big wooden spoon streaked with marrow and wine and sugar and yogurt, and yesterday and grief and passion and jealousy, and tomorrow I'm sure the Marquis won't miss it. She has so many nice things. And when you come back, we'll make you a little black bustle and a black hat and teach you to call down the moon gull and dance with the giant snails and that guard the pantry of time. September's stomach hurt. She found it terribly hard to speak. I've only just gotten here, Miss Goodbye. I don't think I want to be anything but myself just yet. It would be like deciding on the spot to become a geologist back home. What if I don't like rocks when I'm older? Witchery sounds very nice now, but I'm sure I should take better care with my prospects. But the future, child, just think of it. If you see something you don't like, pop. In go leek and licorice, and you can change it. What could be better? Does it really work that way? Can you really change the future? Many Thanks shrugged. I'm sure it's been done once or twice, he said. September wrenched her eyes away from Goodbye's loveliness. Her head cooled and cleared and smoothed itself out. Miss, she said, don't you just really want your spoon back? Goodbye stood up abruptly and brushed off her black dress. The perfume was gone, and she shrank a bit, still a somewhat handsome woman, but the glow, the perfect colors of her, were muted and usual again. Yes, she said curtly, I can't get it. The Marquis has lions. Well, you don't have to shine at me and offer me a bustle. You know, I could get it for you. Maybe I could get it for you. Anyway, I could try. What did I come to Fairyland for, after all? To wander around on beaches like my grandfather, looking for dropped wedding rings? September laughed for the first time since leaving Omaha, picturing her grandfather in his patched jacket, waving his metal detector over the beach of fairy gold. A quest, she thought, excitement rising in her like bread. A real quest, like a real knight, even though she doesn't see that I'm short and don't have a sword. Well, how gallant of you, child, said Hello. She didn't mean to offend with her shining. It's only that the Marquis is fearful and fell. Long ago she hunted witches. She rode out on a great panther and wielded her ice-leaf bow against us. She broke our mother's spoon across her back and killed our brother's farewell and well met. Fine witches in the prime of their craft, all pierced with her arrows, laid out in the snow, and all because we would not give her what she wanted. What did she want? Goodbye answered, her voice thick and ugly. A single day. She commanded us to simmer for her a single day, the day of her death, so that she could hide from it. And we could not serve her. September let go a long-held breath. She stared into the roiling black violet soup, thinking furiously. The trouble was, September didn't know what sort of story she was in. Was it a merry one or a serious one? How ought she to act? If it were merry, she might dash after a spoon, and it would all be a marvelous adventure with funny rhymes and somersaults, and a grand party with red lanterns at the end. But if it were a serious tale, she might have to do something important, something involving, with snow and arrows and enemies. Of course, we would like to tell her which, but no one may know the shape of the tale in which they move. And perhaps we do not truly know what sort of beast it is either. Stories have a way of changing faces. They are unruly things, undisciplined, given to delinquency and throwing of erasers. This is why we must close them up in thick, solid books so that they cannot get out and cause trouble. Surely, she must have suspected the shape of her tail when the green wind appeared in her kitchen window. Certain signs are unmistakable. But now she is alone, poor child, and there do not seem to be too many terrible fairies about. And instead of dancing in mushroom rings, she must contend with very formal witches and their dead brothers, and we must pity her. It would be easy for me to tell you what happened to her. Why, I'd need only choose a noun and a few verbs, and off she goes. But September must do the choosing and the going, and you must remember from your own adventuring days how harsh a task lies before her at this moment. But a machinist's daughter can be shrewd and practical, and can't there be snow and enemies and red lanterns and somersaults, and at least one mushroom ring? That would be the best thing, really, if she could manage it. There must be blood, the girl thought. There must always be blood. The green wind said that, so it must be true. It will all be hard and bloody. But there will be wonders too, for else why bring me here at all? And it's the wonders I'm after, even if I have to bleed for them. Finally, September stepped forward, and quite without knowing what she meant to do it, she dropped to one knee before the witch goodbye. She bent her head to hide her trembling, and said, I am just a girl from Omaha. I can only do a few things. I can swim and read books and fix boilers only if they are a little broken. Sometimes I can make very rash decisions when I really ought to keep quiet and be a good girl. If those are weapons you think might be useful, I will take them and go after your spoon. If I return, September swallowed hard, I ask only that you give me safe passage back to the closet between worlds, so that I can go home when this is all over and sleep in my own bed. And a favor. What sort of favor? Said Goodbye warily. September frowned. Well, I can't think of anything good just now, but I will think of something by and by. The moon peered over the clouds at them. With great solemnity, Hello and Goodbye spat into their hands and shook on the bargain. What about the lions? Goodbye said carefully. Well, I have some experience with big cats. I expect lions are no more fearsome than leopards, answered September, although she was not quite so sure as she sounded. Only tell me, where does the Marquis live, and how can I get there? As one, the three witches pointed west at the cleft of the cliffs. Where else? Said Many Thanks. The capital, Pandemonium. Is it very far? They all looked shamefacedly at their feet. More than Barry, then, thought September. Goodbye, said Hello. Many Thanks, said Goodbye. Farewell, said Many Thanks, and kissed her lightly on the cheek. The werewolf's kiss joined the green winds there, and the two of them got along very well, considering. The full moon shone jubilantly as September strode over the dunes and into the interior of Fairyland with her belly full of witch cake. She smelled the sweet, wheat sugar scent of seagrass and listened to the distant owls call after mice. Then she suddenly remembered, like a crack of lightning in her mind, check your pockets. She laid her scepter in the grass and dug into the pocket of the green smoking jacket. September pulled out a small crystal ball glittering in the moonlight. A single perfect leaf hung suspended in it, swaying back and forth gently, as if blown by a faraway wind. And that is the end of chapter 3. So I hope you enjoy it, and join me next time for chapter 4.